Skype.
I see. On the
At
Skype.
me the Hangout. I did.
Oh, okay. He's there.
Yes. I'll send it to him again.
How many people are watching? Oh my goodness, there's 25 people watching.
That's exciting. Now I need to always right when the show starts, then I need to go mute it because there it is. Okay.
No, where is my, there it is. There we go.
This is amazing, and it's free, and it works every week, and it's also like ridiculous, like all the little buttons you have to click and the things you have to do.
Yeah, imagine running a real TV show.
Yeah,
like a studio full of. Oh my God, it's Scott in the car.
What is happening?
Hello.
Hello.
Trying to be safe.
It looks like Scott has a green screen as well, and he's pretending to be in his car driving to Seattle.
I have both hands on the wheel.
Okay.
It looks like you've been to a cafe.
Don't look down. You're making me nervous.
I've been to a classy, upscale cafeteria.
Ah, indeed, indeed.
This is awesome. So we
how far out are you?
I am in water, passing exit 102.
That means nothing to me. Okay, good.
I'm halfway. I'm a little more than halfway.
Okay.
I'm a little more than halfway.
So you're like an hour and a half out? 2 hours out?
An hour 20, 71 miles.
Yes, we are live. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Your office looks lovely.
Thank you.
I like your new wallpaper.
Do you like my new wallpaper?
Lovely.
Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. Scott is joining us from the... Oh, that video that actually looks pretty good now. It's cut in and you're looking quite crisp.
Are we announcing anything today?
We are.
Let's do that. Or you want...
let's give it a little time. Let's just tease.
Because I'm driving with two hands on the wheel, I want to make sure that we front load all of the interesting bits so that I might hang up and drive with three hands on the wheel.
Okay. Well, we are in the middle of pushing a release right now. And so we're in the middle of pushing a second preview of 2.1. Some folks may have noticed packages went live last night. The releases aren't a binary thing. It's like a wave of stuff that has to happen before we can flip the announcement, and you'll see it show up on blogs and on the download page. So I am told all the actual software and all the assets are in the places where they have to be. So packages went live last night. The download center has the new SDK and runtime installers. Docker Hub, actually, I don't know. I didn't ask. I'm assuming the Docker containers have been pushed. Or if not, they're going to go live very soon. And then Lee, my release PM, is working on getting the download links updated very shortly. It might even happen during the middle of the show. I already have it installed, but the eagle-eyed followers might be able to go and find it.
What will the version numbers be?
Preview 2, 2.1.0-preview 2. And then
not dot 300 or dot 400.
No. Sorry, that's the overall .NET Core release. The SDK always has its versioning scheme. So it's 2.1.300 is the SDK version. Okay. Right. So which is what it was before. So it'll be 2.1.300-preview 2 because it was 2.1.300-preview 1 before. And then they have a build number after it. And the build number is devised from the date and some other garbage, right? But like whatever the one that goes out. I mean, I have it installed, so I can literally just type .NET info and have it look.
I have one precise question that I think other people who are fans will want to understand.
Okay.
Which is, if I get to the hotel in a few hours and I want to upgrade my website, minimal downtime, what do I need to do? I already have the site extension, the Azure site extension. Will that automatically update? How do I make sure my site doesn't break?
No. So the site extension, there's no automatic update facility for site extensions. You'll have to go and go to the site extension gallery in your site. It'll tell you there's an update available if you do that, assuming it's been pushed by then. By the time you get to the hotel, then you can apply the update. That'll change your runtime version on Azure App Service Web Apps to Preview 2. Your alternative, obviously, is to publish self-contained, right? You've always got that option, right? If you want to avoid the scourge of managing versions on your target server or your target environment, you can always do a self-contained deployment and you own your own destiny, right? It's just there's slightly more few moving parts, and you own your own destiny, so you have to make sure that you do servicing and all that stuff.
But the salient point there is you said it will say an update is available. Is it the site extension will say an update is available?
The portal. No. The site extension mechanism in Azure App Service, just like the NuGet package manager in VS, like that dialog, if you open it, it'll tell you if there are updates available for things you have installed. If you go into the portal and you navigate to the site extensions blade of your site in the portal, it will tell you that there is a new version available of that package, of that site extension. It's not automatic in any way, right?
So basically, change preview 1 to preview 2 in my CS proj, and don't deploy until the site extension says it's up to date.
Pretty much. Yeah. So install the SDK, change the package versions, and then go from there. And then there will be a blog post coming out for ASP.NET Core that'll enumerate all the changes, all the new stuff. Hopefully there isn't anything that breaks you from preview 1 to preview 2. I'm not aware of anything. There are some things in preview 2 that itself are broken because it's a preview. So there's a couple of things, some known issues that will be documented. But most of the changes in preview 2 are refinements based on feedback and further investigations that we have done based on the preview 1 bit. So I'm happy to give people a rundown of those prior to the blog post going live during this call. But maybe we can leave that until after the community links.
Well, let me ask you one more question.
Please do.
I remember that global tools were kind of weird in preview 1. Has anything changed in preview 2?
Can you elaborate on what you mean by kind of weird?
There were going to be some tools that were going to be built in and some were not, and I had some issues with .NET User being available in some places but not others. Is user secrets and watch built in now in preview 2? Or
yes.
They're ever present?
Yep. So they're installing the SDK, which is the main install you put on your developer machine. There will be a series of what were previously project tools that will now be pre-installed effectively as global tools. So we author them as global tools, but they effectively get bundled into the SDK. You can't override them. That they become SDK commands for all intents and purposes. So things like .NET Watch, .NET Dev Certs, .NET EF, .NET Watch, I think you said. There's a couple other ones. And then there's some external ones that we own but go to NuGet. They're not built in. They will not be available in preview 2 due to a late find that we had. They will come back in the next release, which we are planning on being the release candidate, the RC1. So those include the ASP.NET Scaffolder, which you can use in VS without this, so that's fine. But if you were one of the very few people who were using the command line experience for ASP.NET Scaffolding, then that's not in preview 2. You can just use the preview 1 version against the preview 2 stuff. It still works. What else? I think there was one other, like the SQL cache tool, I think, that you use to set up the database schema if you're using the distributed cache provider for ASP.NET Core and you want to use SQL to store it. That tool is not available in preview 2. There might be one other. So it's pretty niche. But the things that you care about, I think, are just built in and should just work.
Cool. Sounds good. I will be updating my podcast site today, and I have a blog post today. Razor is such a joy. Using Razor Pages, it's just basically like writing a static site, except it's not static. So I ran this Chrome auditing tool to make my podcast site faster.
Yeah, I saw that.
It's just so fluid to just work with Razor Pages when your site isn't, I don't know, fancy, complex, whatever, enough to require MVC, full MVC.
Mm-hmm. I am so happy that you say that. Now, remember, I do want to reiterate though, it is not about not requiring fancy full MVC. It is a fully capable alternative or better default. I think it scales down better, to your point.
Yeah, it scales down better. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Where I just wanted a couple of pages, that then I want a web API, or then I want a whatever. But like, my markup sucks and my CSS is trash, and I'm working on that. But like literally, the thing says, "Oh, you're using this version of jQuery on this page, but you don't need it on that other page." I just put in a partial. I put in a render partial required false, render section rather required false, and I moved it around. It was like 30 seconds, and then I removed like a half a second off of my load time. Just
right.
It's like you're using server-side includes, but it's super smart and layouts, and it's extremely intuitive. I am very much digging it.
That's awesome. I think you also you tried to get some of the testing stuff, like you're actually writing tests with page models and stuff too, right?
Yeah, I've been working with unit tests, which is step one, which is like stupidly easy. You just make a page and call on get, which seems impossible. And then if you want to do more integration.
Oh, Scott muted himself, which may mean that he dropped out.
Sorry, my Skype just someone tried to call me on Skype.
Oh, okay, no problem.
I think it's John Mont. I think I gotta go.
Okay.
All right, I'll see you later.
That was nice. John Mont is my boss's boss and also Scott's boss's boss.
Yeah. So you take his calls.
You take his calls. Yeah, even if you're in the middle of a live stream. Awesome. So it's always nice to hear nice things from Scott when he uses our stuff, because Scott is one of those people who'll, when he gets a chance, will go and use our product, which is fantastic, because that's we all love to do that when we get the opportunity to work on one of our own things using our stuff. And then obviously has fantastic feedback. So it's great when we get really good feedback like that, which is I mean, we like the constructive feedback as well. Don't get me wrong, we get plenty of that. But it is nice that Razor Pages is making him so happy, because I know he was one of the champions of simplifying a lot of that stuff and keeping the power. So that's good. I'm happy about that.
I just have to, like Scott saying, it's not that it's dumbed down, but it makes easy things easy. So I forget what the saying, but you want things that make easy things easy without making. Like, you want to make hard things easier without making easy things too complicated, right? And so this is a really smooth curve where it's like, if I just want to drop in a page and just start, if I know HTML, I just want to get going, or if it gets out of my way when I want it to,
right? And
then when I want to do something more complex, I don't feel like, oh crap, I'm on this dumbed down thing. It's like, no, I've got all the power I need.
Yep, absolutely. And all the most of the conventions are controllable. So if something really offends you about the way that we decide to make it work by default, you can get in there and write 30 lines of code in the right place and change it completely, right? Like folks, there's a whole bunch of folks who like feature folders for MVC organization, and you just write a bit of code today and you can use feature folders instead. We don't ship that feature out of the box, but it's very easy to implement yourself because we add the right hooks. Razor Pages has a lot of similar things, so I'm good. That's good. I'm glad I'm glad that it's resonating with folks. John.
Community.
I do love community.
I love community extra much today.
John loves community.
Hopefully my tabs haven't gone to sleep by now. So I have this thing. I know people worry. Oops, I gotta hide this. I know people worry.
What was that?
I know people worry about.
You locked on, John? You locked on?
I'm not locked on.
Lock on, John.
Okay. Boom.
Otherwise, every time I cough, it's going to come back to me. There we go.
There should be a thing that's just automatically you cough a special way and it audio senses it and just locks on.
That's true.
Or you just clap twice or something. All right. Jonathan Shannon, he's announcing, so previously known as Botwin, it's Nancy style routing for ASP.NET Core. And what came up over time was so Botwin's been out for a while, but people were confused by the name of it. They were like, is it a bot for Windows? Is it what does this name mean? So they've kind of rebranded it and also kind of set up some community centered stuff in it. So there's a community repository and just some kind of new exciting stuff going on there. So so Carter Community. So it's renamed. I should have said that. It's renamed as Carter. So yeah, neat thing. There's that. This was a neat tweet I saw come in today. So Christoph was testing this out. This is the Docker work the Tech Empower work to get the benchmarks working with Docker.
Yeah, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, right?
Yeah, so he kind of ran through it and got it working and stuff like that. I think when we talked about it a few weeks ago, was it actually working?
Yes. Yeah, it was. Okay. They've been going through and converting framework by framework, test by test.
Cool. All right. So yeah, here was his thing running through the core. I went through and cloned it and neat to see it. So that's cool. Yep. This is third in this series we've been calling out from Fizz. This is on GraphQL with ASP.NET Core. So he had kind of worked through part one was the kind of just very much basics getting started. Part two was building it into middleware. And then part three is he's injecting that middleware. Right. So kind of so kind of a standard, not super fast progression, but just kind of working through getting GraphQL set up. Yeah, nice to see this continue, and of course the code's out there. Andrew writing about passwordless authentication. So the idea here is there's several different, of course there's the old style or the traditional password authentication, username, password, that kind of thing. There's a OAuth style. There's also multi-factor authentication, where like TOTP providers. There's also a thing that you'll see like on Slack or Medium, where basically you go in, you put in your username or email, and then it emails you a login link. Right. It's a one-time login, and so here he's gone through and shown how to do that.
That's cool. Yeah, I read that one before today.
Pretty cool. All right, so Fabian had previously written this up. This is an Angular application using ASP.NET Core and SignalR, and he has updated this to use the Angular CLI. So this is using all the new bits, neat little thing showing this, but just kind of a standard 2 Angular apps and showing them working between each other and keeping in sync. So this is all the new bits, update with all the new bits, including the Angular CLI stuff. Okay. So neat to see that. Okay, Steve Gooden. So there's feel free to jump in and explain better what I'm going to mess up here. But there's the idea with logging of correlation IDs. So when you're working with multiple microservices or multiple different, more complicated stacks, you can use a correlation ID in your logging to kind of trace, to tie a bunch of things together. And so what Steve's done previously was he had a version, or he's got a library that helps with doing that. And so he's released an update for that. So that's basically, so 2 things, I guess, is a reminder that this exists, that it's out there. And then 2 is let people that are using it know that there's an update. Did I explain the correlation ID thing?
Yeah, so I mean, we did a bunch of work in 2.0 around this as well. So there's a concept inside .NET now called activities, which is effectively this idea of having a context, an arbitrary context that flows across arbitrary code execution, across threads, across processes, across machines. And you can use this activity ID in the context associated with an activity to get for distributed tracing type stuff, so that you can add data to this activity in the property bag, so that when you log it out, logging systems can detect if there is an activity present, active right now, and if so, they can grab all the information from the activity, they can add stuff to it, or they can grab it and then omit it. So we do this by default in ASP.NET Core. So basically we have a couple of triggers that if we detect certain circumstances when a request comes in, then we will create an activity. And furthermore, if we detect that the incoming request has a special header that is itself basically an activity ID header, then we will take that ID and stamp that onto the activity, so that that this activity actually represents a larger set of operations, because you're flowing that through the header. Because you can imagine, as you said, a scenario where you have like 3 applications in a microservices type thing, or even just like a mid-tier and a back tier, and they're communicating with HTTP calls. You'd like to be able to correlate that request from the mid-tier to the back tier with the front-end requests from the browser or from the rich client or whatever it was that was making the original call, and have them all be tied together from a tracing and correlation point of view. So we have a lot of this plumbing in the framework now. Most of it lights up when you're using stacks like Application Insights. They can reason about these things by default. They know what to look for. Anyone could integrate to this. So if you have your favorite third-party tracing or logging system, they can do the same thing. Whether it's something like Exceptionless or Elma or what's the one that Nick Craver does, those things, they can find these things through diagnostic source listener and discover when these things take place, and then sort of add this data to the things that they're capturing. So yeah, this is another example of doing that.
Cool. All right. Let me see. We've got several. We had the very popular Blazor show last week. The update on Blazor, the experimental.
That's what I meant. Exceptional.
Exceptional. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, Nick.
Cool. Several things community's been doing. Blazor's interesting because it's experimental. It's people are just figuring things out, right? And it's some things are similar and some things are kind of different patterns and stuff. So first of all, oh gosh, I forget. Ryan wrote this up. So Panes of Glass Ryan wrote up. So he is an F# guy, and he's written up ASP.NET Blazor rendering with F#. So this is a spike. This is him just starting on this, and Blazor, of course, is also experimental. So we'll probably just looking at this web page will catch your computer on fire, but it's pretty neat to see this. He's kind of working through this, so that's fun stuff. So this one, Jonas is writing up using C# await against JavaScript promises. And the whole kind of idea that you can use, because Blazor is WebAssembly and it's web native, it's running in the browser, like you can tie in smoothly with JavaScript.
John, I hate to be that guy.
I didn't lock on.
You didn't lock on. No one can see you. They're all looking at me.
Okay, I am taking a screenshot because it. Oh, shoot, I can't take the screenshot.
How convenient that you can't take a screenshot to prove your innocence.
Wait a second. Control print screen would do this, right? Control print screen.
Me, everybody. Yeah. How about I just...
No, you're right. I absolutely believe you. It says on mine.
There we go. There we go.
So I didn't click anything. I just... Anyhow. It does this weird thing. I swear, I'm like the crazy person that's like, see, didn't you see that crazy thing? And everyone's like, oh, you're crazy. Okay, so Jonas, he wrote up this thing, and it's relatively complex, the work here, to use C# await against JavaScript promises. What I'm pretty sure I remember seeing after this, though, discussion on Twitter was that I think it was Steve Sanderson jumped in and said, this is cool. You won't have to do this by the release.
Right.
We will have this stuff all plumbed out for you.
Of course. So
it's cool that people are figuring this stuff out. If you're working on something now and you need to do this, here it is. But don't worry for going further. This is cool. So Lohith wrote up. So he took he took Tour of Heroes, which is kind of the hello world for Angular, and he has built this out using Blazor. So I've talked to other people who were thinking this would be a neat idea to do. And so Lohith's actually gone through and done this. So that's cool. Nice. It's interesting, Tour of Heroes is kind of it's a canonical, like it's small enough that it's bite-sized, but it does just enough where it's like it exercises the platform a bit, as a single page app platform. So this is cool to see this implemented.
Cool.
And this is from talking.net, and this is on creating a CRUD app using Blazor and ASP.NET Core. So this is just kind of walking through, we're going to create a to-do and, thinking about the CRUD stuff, calling back. Of course, you're not persisting data in the Blazor app. You're calling back to the backend service. So, the work here required to do that. So pretty cool. There's one other one that I had actually... I want to mention this here. This is something we've got. This is linked off the .NET Foundation site. We're starting to kind of promote it more. This is our .NET presentations. It's an organization, so it's multiple repos. Of course, Damien, you're familiar with the ASP.NET Core App Workshop. We have some others in here. Maria put together this one recently, which is ASP.NET Core for Beginners. So the idea with this is if you are completely new to ASP.NET, you're a student or, just getting started programming, this is a approachable half-day one. Also starting to put in some other ones, like, for instance, we have a What is .NET? We have Security and Identity. This is from Barry. And then we also have his Authorization and Authentication Workshop. So the point of all this is to kind of put this all in one place instead of everyone having separate, Frankendex and repositories for their different workshops all over the place and forking them. These are the ones we're going to try and keep up to date. And you are welcome as a community to contribute to them, to grab them and steal 2 or 3 slides out of wherever. This is a resource for everybody. So
this is awesome.
Yeah, cool. So, and it's, you know, to be clear, like I've done a pretty good amount of work on some of these and almost no work on others other than kind of pinging people and saying, hey, that was a cool presentation. Can I get this from you? And we're going to build this out in a lot more detail going forward.
People are asking, what is this site?
Yes.
It's everything that John just said. .NET-presentations.github.io. Yep. It's the .NET Presentations repo under the .NET Foundation org, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Yep.
And it is also, so we include the community links, we tweet them out, and we include them. This will be in there.
But they include workshops that, like, you know, were originally started out by, like, I think one of the first ones was David and I taught an ASP.NET Core workshop over the last couple of years, and then we've rehashed it a couple of times. It bounced around a whole bunch of different people's repos. It's turned into this one, the ASP.NET Core app building workshop, which is now finally housed in a global location on the .NET Presentations thing, which is this thing.
There's this one Maria did.
Yeah.
Yep. This is the one Maria did. And I kind of worked to strategize with Maria in planning this out. This one is built paralleling some docs and tutorials in the docs. And the idea here is that, you know, it's got, like, it's spelled out in detail to walk you through doing all the work. But if you get lost, it links over to the docs at the key points. So it'll help you kind of go like, oh, you know what I mean? So in other words, the docs are always kept up to date too.
And they have, I'm assuming they all have a similar structure, and like they have the steps in completed code as well.
Yes. Yep. Okay. Completed code here. Here's the final one. And then the previous one you were mentioning, this has checked in kind of
so we even there. This one was designed around like a workshop scenario. So you might have like a few dozen people in front of you. You have an instructor, and then the instructor, like, everyone gets all the code and everyone gets the notes, but the instructor basically leads the class through each session,
building it out,
each lesson as you build out the app, and there's lots of leeway to talk about things and all the rest of it. So.
Yep. So like, for instance, and this one also, I think I'd mentioned, but Shane went through and built out this whole front end. So this is an Angular single page app. Oops, got to update that. That's actually, I'm in a weird spot because I want to update to 2.1, but I need to, like, anyhow, that'll be updated with the 2.1 template.
Yep.
But so here he's gone through and built this out using the Angular front end and all that. So cool. I'm done.
You're done.
All right. Well, Scott made you like tell all the news beforehand.
Well, I didn't enumerate, so I can share. Okay. So I can share a little bit. So let me maximize that. Let me go over here. Just whisper while I do all this boring stuff. And let me share this screen here, and then you lock on. There we go. There we go. See, that dead air wasn't quite so dead because I was whispering. All right. So here's the issue that you people don't usually see. All you folk, because it's in a private repo. This is tracking all the blog posts. So these are the blog posts we did for the preview features in 2.1. Obviously, all that stuff still applies. So if you're just checking in to try out the previews now, you can go and read those blog posts. They're on the ASP.NET or Web Dev and Tooling blog, as it's called. Zoop, zoop, zoop. I really should turn off my alerts. So for preview 2, there's a whole bunch of stuff. So as I said, most of these are kind of smaller. All right. And so we have, let me just enumerate. I basically just went through and queried all the issues for things marked enhancement that were closed, and then made sure they had, like, actual commits. And so we've done a couple of improvements to the API controller stuff that we shipped in preview 1 around how we bind to parameters by default. We constructed model. So we've improved the partial tag helper to support the scenario where you want to, this is provide constructed model type to the partial tag helper. This is for the scenario where you want to pass an object that you have already, rather than giving it a reference to something on the model. You can do so. How hard is it to suppress these flipping warnings these days? Like, I find it, like, I go here and it's like, great, how do I turn these off? There used to be a thing, right?
Yeah, there is.
Where is it?
It's the thing that says focus quiet hours.
But that makes my whole machine go into quiet hours. Isn't there just like the suppress notifications thing for like the next 20 minutes?
Thing, right? No, not really. There's one where if it detects you're hooked up to a projector.
None of that stuff happens anymore on mine. There used to be a thing that was like, turn off notifications for an hour. Never mind. Quiet hours. Yeah. We'll see if that changes anything.
So here's the fun thing for me. Windows started detecting that I'm at home.
Yeah.
And then it would put me into like a quiet hours thing.
Nice.
And then, but I work from home, so I was like missing all these notifications. I'm like, what the heck? And it turned out it was, because it was just helping me out.
That's helpful. We've added an analyzer as one of our first analyzers in the product to warn about using HTML.partial. And so we don't have a particularly solid strategy for deprecating APIs or obsoleting them. They can be quite impactful to add. We have an existing obsolescence attribute, but it can be impactful to builds because it ends up failing the build often and can be difficult to turn off and whatnot. And so we're trying out using an analyzer to do this instead. So now that Razor views are compiled by default on build, analyzers will be included by default in these projects. And so if you use HTML.partial, that is the non-async version of those APIs, you will get a warning now. It'll be an analyzer, basically failure, okay? Because there is a danger in using the non-async versions of those because Razor execution is now async. If you execute a partial that itself calls into anything that is asynchronous, then you can end up quite easily deadlocking your application. You can cause, well, technically it's not a real deadlock, but if you continue adding, if you have a persistent set of load on the app, it'll never recover. And so we wanted to ensure that people are using the right API. The idea is that in a future major version, we would delete these APIs. And so the analyzer that we're introducing now is to encourage people to get off using those APIs now, okay? Cool. We have added an option to the templates. Now, as we talked about in 2.1 preview 1, the templates are HTTPS by default now. So there's now an option during File New in Visual Studio and at the command line to opt out of that if you want to. There are some scenarios where obviously you don't want HTTPS, although those scenarios are also shrinking. But you can turn it off now. We've made some small improvements to API Explorer. They were mostly bug fixes, so that's not really that interesting. We made one big change, small but impactful change to Razor pages. So Hanselman found this when he ported his site. With the way that we handle the verb routing, so like when a get request comes in, we call on get, and when a post comes in, we call on post. A lot of sites will get hit with a head request, right? As part of search engines crawling, which says, process the response, but don't return the body. We weren't running any of your handlers on a head request because you didn't have a head handler. Generally, you would have an on-get handler. So we made one surgical change, which was to say, if you don't have an on-head handler on a head request, we will run your on-get handler if you have one. Okay, and that basically we've had multiple customer feedback about this, and so we decided it was important enough that we had to make that change. We updated all our dependencies to JSON.NET 11, the next major version, now that James has released that, so that's good. We added the existing web API.client package to the .app and .all meta packages. So this is the package that's been around since we shipped web API all the way back, but it was recently updated to support Net Standard. So you can now use the web API client package in your .NET Core applications. That gives you all those nice convenience messages like send as JSON, post as JSON, read as JSON. So we include that in the meta package now because it's actually really, really nice to work with. There is support for ARM32 and Alpine coming in this release as well. So if you're interested in running ASP.NET Core on ARM32, you can do that now with the .app package. There will be a shared framework. The packages will work. So you can run on a Raspberry Pi. We did some perf. I don't know if you saw the tweet a couple of weeks ago. We did a perf run on the Raspberry Pi and got some pretty good numbers, close to 50,000 requests per second for plain text, which was pretty good. And then Alpine support is for folks looking at, for super small Docker-based images. The other advantage of images like Alpine is because they're so small with so few dependencies, they can be attractive from a security point of view because there's a lot less in the images. So they're generally much easier to pass a security scan when your image is so small to start with. So that's some feedback that we've had. So we've done that work to support Alpine. We've basically removed the ASP.NET Core Docker images and the SDK image specifically, and we've now sort of rationalized with the .NET Core image. So if you just want to build .NET Core apps, you now should just use the .NET Core SDK image. Previously, we had an ASP.NET Core build image, which included things like Node and Bower and a bunch of other stuff. But the best way to do that today, if you do need to use those things, is to configure a multi-stage build using those features in Docker, where you have a container set up to use Node to do that stage of the build and have and then use the ASP.NET Core or the .NET Core SDK image in order to do the .NET part of the build. And so we have done that change. There's still an ASP.NET Core runtime image because we have the shared framework now. So there's ASP.NET Core.app shared framework. And so you have a separate Docker image for that. But they're all in the same repo now. So if you're looking for all this stuff in Docker, you don't have to know that there's a .NET Core Docker Hub entry and an ASP.NET Core Docker Hub entry that are separate. They're all just in the .NET Core registry now, which hopefully should make it much easier for folks to find the right image, because we did get a lot of feedback about that. The moving of the default identity UI into packages has been complete. So we did that for individual auth in preview 1, if you recall, so that username and password and all that stuff can now, you don't have to have all the UI in the app. It comes from the library. We've extended that to all the other auth options. So if you're using Azure AD, single org, multi-org, or the other options that we have, they are also now come in packages, which is nice. We also updated the scaffolder for the individual auth stuff, but as I said, we had to pull that very late. So the work has happened, it just hasn't shipped. And so you'll see that in the next release, you'll be able to use the Visual Studio experience. Actually, you will be able to use that now. I think so. Hang on, let me try it. Here I am in an app. Here's an app I created earlier. This one doesn't have auth, but I think I can come in here. I haven't tried this yet. New scaffolded item. Look, identity. Yeah, you can do this now. So I can say add. So I can add identity retrospectively. So see this? If I had identity already. So what this will do is it'll add the identity UI package, which gives you all the UI, right? But then you can choose to override any of those things from the default UI by saying, and I want this file in my app, which overrides the one in the library.
So there's the library one, and then it also kind of copies the CSHTML.
Yeah, it basically generates the CSHTML, and if necessary, the the login partial and all that sort of stuff into your app in the right place, the right path, thus that it will win over the one that's in the library. Okay. Cool. So this scaffolder can obviously, you can run this if you've already added identity, or you can run it if you haven't. And so as it says, you can select an existing layout page, or you can just say, just specify a new one, it'll create it, right? So you can say it here, or leave it empty if you just want to use the one set in your view start, which is what I have. And so if I don't override anything, in theory, I think I have to choose a data context. So I have to say, let me add a data context. So I did that.
Well, I was going to say, just for fun, can you override one just to see?
Sure, and then I'll tick one. Let's say we want to override the login and logout pages. So if I tick those two and hit add, this may take a few minutes. We'll see.
Moments. I like moment because it's just what's a moment?
That's true. I should get them to change that string. Anyway, so it added the package, which contains the scaffolder itself to the project. And now it's actually running the scaffolder, generating code. And there we go. So then I get a little README that's like, hey, you may have to go and change some stuff. All right. So if we go over to the right here, it added my area for identity, and it added what is required in order to override the stuff that I asked to override. Okay. So there's my identity hosting startup, which is the code that you could put in the startup class, but because I added it after the fact, it's easier to factor it into its own class using the iHosting startup feature. And then your app will find this because of this assembly tag here, assembly attribute.
Yeah.
ASP.NET will find this class automatically without you having to call it from your startup class manually, and it will run all this as part of your startup code. All right. So I mean, some of these things end up running twice, but they're idempotent, so it doesn't matter. So this sets up identity, right? So this adds all the identity stuff.
And then if you, I want to see that page, the two pages
the page that got overridden. So under account and under login.
So cool.
Right, so there's the login page. So now I'm free to override the login page, but all the other stuff, the account management and everything, is coming from the library, so I don't have it in my app. Okay, so that is the idea behind this. So we would like folks to try this out and give us feedback. We know there are some usability issues with it at this point. A couple scenarios don't work as well as we'd like, or at all. Like if you start from empty right now, I think, and you run the scaffolder, it emits code that doesn't compile. You have to go and fix it in a bunch of places, which we'll get all this fixed. But this is the state of it in preview 2. So yeah, that's definitely an improvement, and so it gives you an idea of the direction we want to go on this.
One thing to show you that I'm not completely paying attention to you, but just looking at shiny things.
Okay.
That scaffolder UI looked kind of cool and modern, but a little different than some of the other dialogues I'm used to in Visual Studio.
It did?
Like, no, in a good way, but I mean, like, it just looks.
That one?
Yeah, it looks. I don't know. Is it built to kind of?
It's all WPF. It's all the same base stuff. It's I honestly I don't know.
All right.
It's just WPF. Like this is custom UI for the scaffolding experience.
Okay, I like it. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying it looks Looks like I'm more modern-y than some of the other scaffolders.
I think we did give the feedback that we wanted this to be a tree view instead. So rather, like if you just want to say, I want to override everything in account, you could just tick the account folder, or you could expand it and then choose the files you want. So I think that work is still ongoing. So, but this is the state of it as it is right now.
The checkbox tree.
Yeah, exactly. Like a checkbox tree. Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, so that's in there, which is good. So we've got that in that improvement. What else? The key per file. So this is what was previously known as the Docker configuration provider or the container configuration provider. So a couple of different container orchestrators like Docker Compose and Kubernetes support this idea of supplying secrets or secret configuration or just file-based configuration for the container generally by having a special folder that's mounted, volume mapped into your container generally, that then has a file per configuration key. So I have a value called foo with a value of bar. So I'd have a file name of foo, and inside that would be a value of bar, right? So we built a configuration provider for our configuration system that supports this convention. It's called I think it's key per file configuration provider, and you would typically use it in container deployments. That's the idea for it. There's some new stuff in identity around this personal data attribute. This is designed to make it in systems where you're extending the identity system to contain profile information. So like this person's favorite color or the name of their first dog or, that type of stuff, or whatever information you want to store about a user, and you're doing it through identity. You can now attribute those properties on your model with the personal data attribute, and then that marks it as something that might be potentially sensitive when it comes to things like legislation, like GDPR.
Great. So all the GDPR stuff, all that, then this will be aware of that.
And then this can be flowed through encryption and all those type of things. So it gives you metadata that you can then inspect at the right point in your app in order to do the right thing, right?
Cool.
We had to pull out or postpone the work around ANCM that we were doing. So we've talked about the improvements to ANCM that we're working on to make it in-process hosting and to make it more resilient to version changes in the future, because currently it's a global native module. We had to pull that out. It just wasn't ready to ship in the timelines that we have for 2.1. And so what we're doing is we're kind of refactoring it such that when 2.1 goes out, we can continue to incrementally improve the ANCM stuff, and people can choose to take those previews and run them with 2.1.0 RTM. Okay, so you don't have to wait necessarily for like the next minor release and however much time. We want to try and continue the ANCM work in a non-impactful way so that you can install it side by side with the production sort of current version of ANCM and not worry about breaking yourself. Sorry, go for it.
Was there like one big blocker on this, or is it just kind of a bunch of
It's just coverage. Like the danger was literally because ANCM today is a global component. If we want to change it to improve 2.1, you risk breaking 1.0 apps and 1.1 apps and 2.0 apps, right? And so we have a new plan which literally starts versioning ANCM side by side like the rest of .NET Core. Which it means there's a couple more moving pieces, and like we had to change installers and all that type of stuff, but it ultimately gives us much better flexibility when it comes to being able to make these type of changes moving forward, and without the risk associated with making those type of changes. Okay, so unfortunately, as I said, had to get pulled out, but we'll give folks more detail on how they can continue to test with it and give us feedback, because we really do want to get people trying it once 2.1 is out. So that we can get the feedback we need to make sure, be confident and be when we're ready to actually ship it. My son is, I got distracted. Someone just rang my doorbell. And so my son just rang my doorbell and is like dancing in front of the camera. This is what happens as soon as you put a doorbell camera on your house, right? Is that all the kids learn and they just distract you during the day.
Yeah.
The Razor Pages and controller feature where you can have properties that are backed by temp data. We've now extended that to support view data as well. This is particularly useful where you want to have like pages or views set the title of the page, and that has to go through the view data dictionary all the way to the layout page, and it's all just magic strings. So now at least you can set it from your page model on a property or your controller on a property, mark it as view data. You can reference it in the view in a strongly typed fashion because it'll be a property. And then the only place you have to reference it by string is in the layout page. And then we have an issue logged that for a future version, we can get rid of the string in the layout page as well, then hopefully have it nicely sort of strongly typed all the way through. So we've made some improvements there as well. And then lastly, in Kestrel, we have made the decision to switch Kestrel to the sockets transport by default. So that's true in Preview 2. It's not libuv by default anymore. It is sockets. libuv is still available as a package for folks who really want to use it. There's really not much more it gives you in terms of flexibility or configuration. So, but there are some very niche circumstances where you might want to use it over sockets today. But sockets is now the default. And we added support for SNI, or server name identification, which lets you, I actually have an email here which talks about that, which I have to put in the blog post here from Chris. Server name identification is basically the feature that lets you have multiple HTTPS certificates registered in a single application for different host names, all listening on the same IP address, right? So typically before SNI, you would have to have a separate IP address or port on the server. I think it's actually, one or the other. Usually you don't want people to have to change the port, right? Because it's all 443. So you'd have to have a separate IP address for each of the domains that you want to register for a given application, so that they can load a different certificate. SNI lets you do this in a late bound way, all right? IIS has supported this since version 7, I think, 7.5. And Internet Explorer got this support in IE 9 or something. So it has been around forever, but we didn't have it in .NET Core. So we've now got the changes in .NET Core itself in the SSL stream to support this, and we've plumbed this through to Kestrel. So this is the type of code you see. Basically, when you configure Kestrel, in this case, this application has 3 domains that it listens on: localhost, example.com, and subexample.com. There's a separate certificate for each one, obviously, because they're separate domain names. Then it configures a dictionary. This happens once per application so that it can look up the certificate per domain. And then when a connection comes in, this callback gets called by Kestrel. And it basically says, hey, which certificate should I use for this connection? All right. And then you can look up, it passes you the name of the host it came in on, and then you can use that to go and look up the correct certificate and return the correct certificate, or return none if you don't want a certificate to be used. Okay. So that's a nice development, a sort of a late feature that we got into one for folks who need that type of capability.
Cool.
Done. And I have a meeting to go to. So.
Okay, can I take one super quick question?
Please do.
Somebody said, when you offer templates, do you make them 508 so that's accessible? Do you make them 508 compliant?
I don't know. That used to be a pillar. I don't want to say yes, but I don't want to say no. So someone should log an issue, and we should investigate that and get a definitive answer.
I will do that.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you want to take any more questions, or do you need to?
I have to go to another meeting.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
So Quinton does ask, where can they find out about EF Core on 2.1? There will be a blog post on EF Core on the .NET blog, hopefully by the end of today. Assuming that the release gets live by the end of today, we get the download page updated, then you'll be able to, that blog post will go live today. I'm looking at the page right now, and the link has not gone live yet. So,
all right. Yeah. Have fun in your meeting.
Thank you very much. Dramatic zoom out. I'll just do a traditional one. I'll just push the button.
All right.
Ooh.
Whoa, that's crazy. That looks weird because I see me at my office.
It's the portal into your office on my wall.
That's just crazy. Okay.
All right.